Thank you guys for being here so much. I'm here to talk about the incredibly uplifting topics of conflict and change today. And what I'm going to talk a lot about today is my ultimate conflict in life, which is time. And it's not an original idea, but I think something that we all face in our lives today. And I first just want to say congratulations to everyone in this room because you battled your conflict with time and made the time to be here, which is huge. So welcome. I also want to say thank you quickly to Bevan and Isaac, two of our amazing instructors, for hyping you guys up. Hopefully your blood is flowing a little faster and you've worked off some of the donuts from the donut wall. And I'm really grateful to them and to Will for inviting me and to all of you for being here this morning. So I did a bunch of research to prepare. I talked to everyone I could about conflict and change and the Welcome Conference and read a lot about all of you. And it turns out there weren't really any definitive sources of information around any of these topics. But what I did learn was somewhat shocking. While there are countless courses and workshops about public speaking and conferences, no one really teaches us how to listen. According to the Listening Center, about 75% of the time we're supposed to be listening, we're forgetful, preoccupied, or not paying attention. 75% of the time, okay? What that means is immediately after we hear someone speak, we remember about half of what they said. And just a few hours later, the science says only about 10 to 20% of what we've heard has been retained. Does anyone remember anything so far from today? So why is this? As soon as we hear a trigger, we're triggering our own response. We're waiting to reply. We're processing information. So according to this Listening Center, the average attention span for North Americans in our so-called age of communication is now 8 seconds. 8 seconds. This basically puts us just about at the rank of goldfish. Goldfish. So this is amazing. In our so-called age of communication, our attention spans are lower than goldfish, which really reveals a great deal about the value that we place on our interactions with others, but above all, on our time. Okay, so here we go. Try to capture 25% of what I've said, and all I'm saying is you're going to be doing better than a goldfish. So as I mentioned, when Will told me the theme of this year's conference was conflict and change, I immediately thought of my greatest conflict in life, which is time. It's really our only finite resource. It's the one thing we can't get back, yet it's also one of the things that we fight the hardest for. Our biggest challenge these days doesn't lie in our neatly organizing our schedules. Safe to say, we're very skilled at filling our time. Sometimes our biggest challenge is saying no more often than saying yes. And when we're pressed for time, the first thing to be deprioritized is our personal space to connect with ourselves and to be thoughtful. And yet, that's the thing we need the most. Think about how many hats each of us wears over the course of the day. Now think about how often you take any of those hats off. You probably actually don't. And not just because you don't have the time, but it's because our lives are more integrated than ever before. I compare this to what used to be, a compartmentalized life, a slower, simpler life. Balancing work and life was a possibility. We could go off the grid and take space for ourselves. I remember when I started working in 1999, our computers actually stayed in the office, and we didn't have handheld devices. So even if I left the office at 9 or 10 at night, I was off until the next day. With this additional space, we had more opportunity for reflection, for connection, and we measured our priorities in hours. Now, boundaries don't exactly exist. Now we measure our priorities in minutes. A more integrated life does mean we get to do more. And now we do connect with more people, more news, more resources, and we can pursue fulfillment in so many ways. An integrated life means we're constantly connecting, but it doesn't put more minutes in the day. It does the opposite. We're always filling the space we have. We're never taking it for ourselves. We're always rushing around from obligation to obligation, doing a lot of things, but how much are we actually accomplishing? How much impact can we have if we're mentally sandwiched between all of our obligations? Clearly, less impact than if we'd set ourselves up to feel more at peace throughout the chaos. There's no industry where this is truer than hospitality. The act of making someone feel welcome, heard, acknowledged, cared for. Whatever our actual job titles are, we are all in the service of others. Last week, we lost the great Maya Angelou. She famously said, people will forget what you said and they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. We create space and experience for others. In that way, our time and our customers' time are really bound together. We're most hospitable to our customers, our diners, our riders. We can be less hospitable to our employees, and oftentimes we're least hospitable to ourselves. To be truly hospitable, we have to be in touch with ourselves. And that means being vigilant, not when it's easy, but when it's hard. I'm not a reformed space taker just yet, but I'm working on it. I've always believed in the power of hustle and striving, and have always been something of an accomplishment addict with no real sense of self. One of my most distinct memories in the earlier part of my career was a weekend trip I was taking with close girlfriends. I worked for Starwood Hotels at the time, and one of the best things about that was we got these friends and family rates where we could take people to a W hotel for $50 a night, and in 2001, that was super cool. I got to the airport late, as always, incredibly harried, flew across the country, met a bunch of my girlfriends from college, and as they checked in and drank the minibar dry, I spent the night working on a project that I had committed. And as the weekend went on, and the dinners and the pool party and all that went on, I continued working in the hotel room. And I remember flying back and thinking, I never got anything out of this weekend. I actually don't know how my friends are doing because I was so focused on delivering this project. And the next time the girlfriends were getting together, they didn't call because I was the one in the room for the entire weekend. How many times have we done this? Compromised on something personally important in service of some aspect of our work that seems bigger than ourselves. In the moment, it's justified. We think this is what we have to do to get ahead, to succeed. I've realized now I've spent a lot of time in my 20s trying to hustle and prove that I was the hardest working, the most committed to one boss or another, without making any space to figure out or prove to myself why this was important. And then, as luck would have it, and I mean real luck, in 2008, I was introduced to SoulCycle. For context, I was working 60, 70-hour weeks at the time and was 6 months pregnant with my first child. I had this rule, and I still do. If you hear about something 3 times from 3 different people, you have to try it. Back then, SoulCycle came up again and again and again. I went to the first studio on the Upper West Side, and I definitely was not expecting a routine-altering experience. But that's what I found. For 45 minutes, I was forced to literally lock myself in. I was on that bike of a sea of other riders. The class was packed, the lobby was more packed, the energy was vibrant, and the space it created was real. At that time, the boutique fitness industry didn't exist. What did exist were gym membership contracts. Julie and Elizabeth, SoulCycle's co-founders, had a vision to make indoor cycling into an experience, into something social and joyful, and at the same time disconnected, but connected to a group of people, as Randy said, moving to the rhythm in a candlelit space. But they had to convince people that paying for an individual class was actually an approach to wellness that yielded higher returns. Having a gym membership doesn't mean you actually go. Just by having that barcode tag on your keychain, we feel as if we're working toward a goal. SoulCycle didn't plan to reinvent the gym. We had to reinvent the model. We found that paying by class actually increases your accountability to the group and to yourself. You bring a different energy to something that you commit to each time. We also knew we had to create an experience that was so much more than a workout. If you've ridden at SoulCycle, you know it's really group theater. It's a live production every hour on the hour. An inspirational instructor spends 45 minutes leading you through a journey that's not just physical and musical, but emotional at its core. When you're physically clipped in, it forces the sense of focus that, at least for me, I could never find with other forms of exercise. You can't not get in touch with yourself. And I did. After years of working toward goal after goal, chasing plan after plan, it was one of the first moments I felt like I really had mental space. I started asking myself questions. What do I really need to do today? Why is that bothering me? What triggered me to react in that way? And as time went on, the questions have become bigger and deeper. Why did I make that choice? Who and what do I value? Ultimately, what's my why behind everything I do? A few years ago, I dropped my son off at school, and he was really proud to show me an exercise that he had gone through in his classroom called Big Deal, Little Deal. At the time, he was 5, and this lesson of Big Deal, Little Deal was a way for the teachers to frame for children how to handle social situations. He showed me that his little deal was walking onto the roof to play and a friend not being there. His big deal was walking onto the roof to play and getting punched in the face. And we talked through maybe punching not happening in the class and why he would think about something like that. And as I worked my way down to SoulCycle and was in the room that day, I really reflected on this idea of big deal, little deal. It's a really great framework for how we think about the chaos that approaches us every day in our lives. And now it's something I brought back to my team and something we use often at SoulCycle. When something goes wrong, which it always does, is it a big deal or a little deal? Can I delegate it? Do I have to handle it? Can we let it go? Or does it actually need to be addressed? SoulCycle was really the space that gave me that moment of reflection in something that I probably would have just left in my son's classroom and not taken with me. I joke now that we should keep notepads and pens on the handlebars of every bike because that's where I do my best thinking. For you, maybe it's while you're out running or meditating or somehow finding your own rare pocket of quiet. But for me, it's on that bike. For those of you who are already into this, great job. And for the rest of us, including me, here's why it's urgent. Staying in touch with what we want and who we are allows us to make better decisions in moments of chaos, when the absolute last thing we can do is take a minute to really think critically. We can train ourselves to react from our core values instead of responding based on emotion. It's like anything else, we're exercising muscles. The ultimate conflict we face is time. The ultimate weapon is personal alignment. We're each building companies and businesses every day, but the truth is companies don't lead, people lead. And when you're building your team, aligning your values with those around you is critical. As SoulCycle's co-founders, Julie and Elizabeth, were transitioning away from the heavy lifting of day-to-day operations in the last 2 years, we began to add new leaders to our leadership team. Any major leadership transition is a conflict. I needed to hire 5 senior positions really quickly, and I did. However, quickly it became clear that things weren't working with one of our newest leaders. Internally, our team and culture was stressed, frustrated, and became rapidly disengaged. I had to take ownership over how this had happened, and I had to make a change. Reflecting on why it didn't work, it really came down to not exploring their values. It's a business problem we can all relate to. When we're at war with time, we often don't make the time to understand how a leader leads versus the value we think he or she can add. Now when I meet a candidate, I look for what I call the rudder. Our rudder is what allows us to navigate the choppy waters. It's a list of the things we personally value. It helps us define the kind of leader we want to be. For me, my truest leadership value is that all jobs are my job. There is no job beneath me, or too big, or too small. Nothing is someone else's problem. When I was sprinting toward building a team, I didn't make the time or the space to ensure our newest leaders' core values aligned with ours. These values guide how we operate, not just in work, but in life. Because no one in this room is satisfied with just enough. We want it all. We want to negotiate a fulfilling career and enduring happiness with our partners, our children, and ourselves. But the truth is, there is no such thing as work-life balance anymore, and there shouldn't be. And we don't need to fortify different versions of ourselves that only operate within certain hours. I'm Mom Melanie and Work Melanie, all 24 hours of every single day. I could fight for boundaries all I want, or I could fight for authenticity. And authenticity, I believe, is a daily practice. In our office, the company's motto is on the wall. It says, "Find your soul." For those of us here, I want to modify that and say, find your soul cycle. Find your thing. I know I need that room and that sanctuary to give me the space to align myself. Time, by definition, is cyclical. That's the conflict. We've got to begin prioritizing our own space and then use it to map out our own values. So let's recognize the time we've taken today and be present in it. Take it with you, and then find space for yourself tomorrow. Thank you.